Hello and welcome to the garden. This is just a quick video about the pollination of sweet corn. So if you've grown corn before, you're going to be well familiar with all of this, but if you haven't grown corn before, maybe there'll be something useful in it. So my corn here has been tasseling for some weeks. So the male flowers appear at the top. They're called the tassels, and the females, they're called the silks, and you can see why in a moment. They look like fine strands of silk. So sweet corn is ordinarily wind pollinated, so insects don't really play any part with sweet corn. It can be a bit of a problem when grown under cover. Now, I do like to grow a crop of corn under cover. It encourages it to crop sooner, and that's not bad because that then spreads the harvest between this crop and the outdoor crop that's going to come afterwards. The problem under cover is that sometimes there's not much of a draft, and that then doesn't help with the pollination. Now, I do have two doors on my polytunnel, one each end, and I've had them open for quite some time, especially during this damp weather, because I need as much airflow as possible to try and minimize disease in here. So I'm hoping that has done a reasonable job on the corn as well. But what you can do is just come through and give them a little bit of a shake, and you'll see the pollen fall down onto the silks below. Or you can actually take some of the male flowers and then you can brush them over the females, and I'm going to do a little bit of that today as well. So here's my male flowers, and when they first come out, they just have these sort of closed pods on them, and then the anthers appear, and these are laden with pollen. So if I just give this a little shake, I don't know if it will show up on the video, but there's tons of very fine pollen coming off of this stuff, and that's normally blown about by the wind. Now, these corn plants have got pretty tall in the last couple of weeks. Some of them are already hitting the roof. You can see here perhaps just how much pollen has been produced. It's not doing a lot of good when it's landing on that leaf though. So that's just a mountain of this ever such fine pollen, and normally that would be blown about on the wind and will be pollinating neighboring plants. So here we've got a good example of the silks. This is the female part, and each one of these fine strands is connected to a single seed. So to get a full cob of corn, every single one of these strands has to be pollinated, and outdoors that's usually quite effective so long as the weather is good. Now, in weather like we've had for the last few days, it's been damp and miserable. Pollination outdoors would be pretty poor. The pollen really doesn't move very well under those conditions, but under cover we don't have that problem. But what I do want to make sure is that each one of these is really getting a good dose of pollen. Now, I can see on some of these there is plenty of pollen about, but not all. And you can see on the leaves here perhaps, you can see that there's pollen on all these surrounding leaves. So it has been falling, and it may be that if I don't do anything, it would still be absolutely fine. Now, the males appear sometimes a few weeks before the females show up. So these tassels were out, and in fact they were spilling pollen before the first of the silks appeared, and that can always be a slightly worrying moment. Now you can see I've got this is going to be the first cob on this plant, so that's why the silks are quite well developed. On this one here, this is the second cob on this plant, and well, you can see that this is quite a bit behind, and I may or may not even get the second cob from each one of these. The only one I really rely on is the first cob, But yeah, I'm going to see if I can give these just a little bit of help. So what I'm going to do is just remove a little bit off of one of the male flowers from a neighbouring plant, and I'm just going to give that a little tap and just brush that over these silks. And the idea is to make sure that each one, every one of these picks up a grain or two of pollen. Now I'm not taking the whole of the male flower off. I don't like to do that because they are doing their job in a natural way there. I'm just trying to encourage it just a little bit. Giving these plants a little shake, nothing too dramatic. That is more than enough to dislodge a ton of pollen. It's not a bad idea if you bend it over towards one of the other plants while you do it, and that is going to shower its neighbours with pollen. Hopefully this way I'm going to get nice full cobs. Well, there's no problem if you've got a partially filled cob, you can still eat what is there, but it is much nicer if every one of those kernels has developed, of course. Well, some of those plants have already produced silks for 2 cobs. Some of them only the first cob is showing, and some of them haven't really produced any silks yet at all. So they're all at slightly different stages. I've never grown this variety before. This is Swift. It's a hybrid, so I kind of expected a little bit more uniformity, but it's not a problem because most of the time I'm not growing hybrids and I don't really like the uniformity. It's much better if there's a little bit of variation there. Some of these cobs will be ripe before the others, and that's perfect for me. I'm not looking to harvest the whole lot in one go. So I will come through and do this a few more times over the next, I don't know, probably another week, and then that job will be done. I'll give the stems a little shake and occasionally pick off a couple of bits of the male flowers and brush or tap them over the silks, and hopefully we'll get nice full cobs from that process. Then I'm going to leave them alone, and the next sign I'll be looking for is those silks turning brown, and when that happens I can start to take a look at the cobs and see how they're doing. Well, I certainly hope the weather improves a bit before the outdoor crop starts tasseling. In these conditions I think pollination might be a little bit poor outdoors, and that is one of the advantages of growing under cover. You can be far more certain of getting reasonable pollination, but because they're not outdoors in the wind, it's useful to come and give them a little bit of a helping hand. But anyway, that is all for this video, so thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.